So Matthew 8, verses 28 through 34 this morning. And when he came to the other side, to the country of the Gadarenes, 2 demon-possessed men met him, coming out of the tombs, so fierce that no one could pass that way. And behold, they cried out, "What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?" Now a herd of pigs was feeding at some distance from them, and the demons begged him, saying, "If you cast us out, send us away into the herd of pigs." And he said to them, "Go." So they came out and went into the pigs, and behold, the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned into the waters. The herdsmen fled, and going into the city, they told everything, especially what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, all the city came out to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. I should have given a trigger warning for Caitlin there. If you don't know, Caitlin has a pet pig. For those in the recording, one of my congregants has a pet pig. I leaned towards the phone to say that. Yeah, no problem. And its name is Pancake. That's crazy. So, there's a whole breakfast. That's wild, yeah. And to give some context, in the weeks prior, we talked about Christ giving authoritative signs and wonders, showing his power over physical barriers, over natural barriers, right, with the storm. And now today we have on display his authority and power over evil. Opening up this passage in 28 and 29, we have 2 demon-possessed men among the tombs, and Jesus comes across them on his journey, though they make a request to him. And they make a request to him. Demons in the New Testament, you'll notice, there's a couple more times in Matthew, and we'll get there. But when you come across demons in the New Testament, and they come across Jesus, they recognize him. They recognize his identity. But oftentimes you'll see that they fear him and try to ward him off. And so in this case, you notice the demons ask if he has come to torture them before the appointed time. And the appointed time is a reference to the day of judgment, where Christ will have the final victory over them. And so what's odd is it seems even now they are aware of this. They're aware of who he is and what he has the power to do, and therefore they beg him to send them into a nearby herd of pigs rather than destroy them. Now, I don't want you to come away from this passage and get the impression that Christ showed any sort of grace to the demons by sending them to the herd of pigs instead of destroying them. There's a timetable that Jesus follows here for the will of the Father to be done in the time in which it's supposed to be done. There's a timetable for his ministry and his victory over evil in the end, and his work still to be done on earth. So for now, casting the demons into the pigs was a grand enough show of his divinity and power. In response, the herdsman sees this, and he goes into the city and tells of what happened, specifically of what happened to the demon-possessed men. And in turn, the people of the city beg Jesus to leave their region. At a glance, this reaction might not make sense to us. Right? Why would the city beg Jesus to leave at the end? But that herdsman, you have to understand, his livestock just drowned into the sea. And these herds could be huge. You could have over 1,000. You could have hundreds. And so picture hundreds of pancakes. Just gone. So this man, the thing is, he witnesses this happening, and he shows little regard to the greater meaning behind it and what Jesus is doing. He sees only his personal loss in the matter, and out of selfishness, therefore, goes to, in practical terms, he just tattles on Jesus to the people of the city and tells them what happened. And the city is receptive to this because they're predominantly Gentile. Right? A Jewish city would not care if their pigs ran off of a mountain, because they don't like pigs. They have dietary laws that would restrict this, but the Gentile audience would have been receptive to it. What's neat, though, is what this man doesn't realize he's doing by proxy is telling everyone in the city of the Lord's great power over evil, and by complaining, bears witness about the authority of Christ over evil. And this is why the text goes to mention in verse 34, when it says he told the city about what happened. The text in verse 34 also says, especially the bit about the demon-possessed men, right? But especially that part of the story. The city shares in the negative disposition towards this that the man had, although, because although Jesus had clearly had great power and authority, despite that, the culture at the time would consider this differently than a Jewish audience would. And so that's why they asked him to leave. Dr. Craig Keener explains that there were ancient Jewish stories about demons where they would often attempt to negotiate the least difficult terms if they were going to have to leave a person or object that they possessed. So if a Jewish person heard the story about the demons going to the unclean pigs, they would think, of course they would go there, right? Pigs are unclean, they're dirty. Of course, of all the places they would go there. That makes sense to us. So the Jews would think that. Also in Jewish tradition, demons had pretty much two options. You could either die, or you could either be destroyed, or you could be bound. And so sometimes it would be bodies of water that they would be bound to. So Matthew says nothing to the contrary here. Therefore, his readers probably would have assumed this, that these demons would have been bound to the depths of the sea. And the prophets did wonders also in the Old Testament. I mean, you know this. Prophets did wonders and signs in the Old Testament. And they would have probably thought Jesus was some sort of prophet after that. But this isn't a Jewish audience. This is a Gentile city. They wouldn't have had any of those concepts in mind at all when they heard this story. They would have thought him to be a sort of magician or sorcerer, which was, by the way, it would have always been dark magic. It would have always been an evil sort of sorcery. You don't want anything to do with it. So naturally, when they hear this story, they don't want anything to do with it. On top of that, they just watched all this livestock, this herd, tumble off of the cliff. They're like, we want nothing to do with this person. So there are multiple possibilities of why they wanted him to leave, but the result is the same. All the city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to leave their region. Now, that's contextually what's important to gather. But there are a few things in terms of application that I want you to consider. First, in acknowledgement of the context, Jesus and his disciples, have just crossed the Sea of Galilee into the region of the Gadarenes. The Gadarenes was a Gentile area, and it was known for tombs and unclean places. And so what's important to gather is an understanding that Jesus is willing to go to places and people who are considered unclean, or outside the bounds of religious norms. So as believers hoping to reach others with the gospel, we have to be able to we have to be able to talk to those whom we consider others. And we have to be able to venture out beyond the world we know if we want the world to know the Lord. To ask you plainly, are we willing to take the gospel to places and people that others might avoid? Are we ready to step out of our comfort zones to reach the lost? Jesus and his disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee not to go to a place of comfort, not a place of religious devotion, not a place where his name would be honored. He goes to an area known for tombs and its darkness, its uncleanness. These were Gentiles, people who had no regard for the law of God, people who were ceremonially defiled, and people who lived in the shadows of spiritual death. And yet, in his mercy, Jesus, the Son of God, as the text clarifies, sets his feet upon unclean ground. And now, the question that we have to ask, are we willing to follow his footsteps? Even when his footsteps land on unclean ground. Even when his footsteps land in territory that is uncomfortable or unfamiliar. Will you go to the places that others avoid? Will you go to the places that others despise? Will you, with the same compassion that Christ displayed, step into the darkness of this world, not to conform to it, but to bring the light of the gospel of Jesus Christ? I mean, I've asked this question before, but truly think about it. When is the last time you've ever been in a place of discomfort? Even if not a literal foreign land, it could just be a social interaction. Are you willing to talk to people who look different from you, speak differently than you, come from a different background? When is the last time you've shared the gospel with anyone? Some of you might be content going to church Sunday or Wednesday and think you're fulfilling your Christian charge. But this is merely the Christian bare minimum. Your Christian charge is to be a witness to the ends of the earth. Many so-called Christians today don't even witness to their own children. It's a travesty of the contemporary church. There's this perverse temptation to think at times, I'm saved not by works but by faith alone, and therefore I will be content with the bare minimum because I'm in anyway. Beloved, what loving marriage is content with doing the bare minimum? Someone told me earlier in the week that they commended my courage for partnering with another church and spreading the gospel in the community because most pastors would be content to see those rooms upstairs empty than to open the doors. And it meant the world to me when someone said that, because I felt as though my belief was understood, this wild belief of mine that God did not call us to safety or to comfort or to certainty. He called us to spread the gospel. Like the call of Abraham when God said, "Go away from your country and your kindred to the land that I have called you." Beloved, that land He has called you towards is not your recliner. Is not at all. It is not all of your likes and none of your dislikes. It is not your preferences. It is not your way of doing things. It is His. His way is difficult. His road is narrow. And the destination is messy and treacherous because it is the sick, not the well, who need the great physician. Beloved, if you want to be the hands and feet of Christ, you must remember that the hands and feet of Christ were pierced. There is nothing comfortable or easy about this task that we've been called to. And I want to let you on a little secret. I can do this because because we've lost people over the years. But I'm going to tell you this. My first year here, I did a home visit. And one individual told me, you might as well just go pastor somewhere else, because that church is going to die, and it's been dying since the hoodlums moved in nearby. He said, no one's going to go to that church because there's all the hoodlums around. And my response was, well, I think hoodlums need the gospel too. And that's still my response. Whatever the hoodlums are to you, right? Whatever the others are to you, whatever the unclean places of the world, those are the places we're called to. And here lies another layer to the story. Understand that not only did Christ go to an unclean place, he went to unclean people. Not only did Christ go into the darkness to be light, to this place, but to people. He meets two demon-possessed men. And what does Jesus do? He goes straight to them. He confronts them. He confronts the demons and casts them out and delivers the men. There is no hesitation. There is no avoidance. There is no reluctance. He goes to the lost and brings them life. People are not just the backdrop of their broken setting. They themselves are broken. If there is any hope of us growing as a church, we have to be willing to take the gospel to places and people that others might avoid. Are we as a church ready to take the message of life to those living in spiritual death? Or do we shrink back, afraid of what others might think, afraid of the discomfort, afraid of the messiness that comes with real ministry? Jesus calls us to do more than comfortable Christianity. He calls us to follow him into the world's brokenness, into the darkness, with the message of hope and grace. We must be ready to go to those places, to the places that others wouldn't even think of going. And the next thing I want to highlight is why we so often don't do this. It may be helpful in turning the ship around. Look at verse 29. It says, "And behold, they cried out, 'What have you to do with us, O Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time?'" The demon-possessed men immediately recognized Jesus as the Son of God and acknowledged his authority over them. They're fearful of his power. It's like James 2:19. Even the demons believe and shudder. Warren Wiersbe says we can construct a statement of faith from the words of the demons here. They believed in the existence of God and the deity of Christ, as well as the reality of future judgment. They also believed in prayer, and they knew that Christ had the power to send them into the swine. I'm going to go out on a limb and make a bold statement today. More often than we like to admit, believers give far less acknowledgement to the authority of Christ over them than these demons do. And please do not think I'm high-fiving the demons in this story. I'm certainly not. I'm not high-fiving them for having good theology. I'm just pointing out how badly we live out our theology. On paper, you'll probably check off all of the boxes. If I asked you this morning to raise your hand if you believe in the authority and power of Christ, you would raise them. Yet if I asked you to tell me the last time you've stepped out in faith and entered into discomfort, willingly in faith, not because God brought you there, kicking and screaming, or the last time you've genuinely witnessed to someone, many of you would fall silent. Now think about this for a moment. These demons, these agents of darkness, who are under the dominion of Satan himself, recognize the lordship of Christ. They know who he is, they know his power, they know his authority, and they tremble. They're not ignorant of who he is. They're not indifferent. They know that he is the eternal king, that he is the sovereign ruler of the universe. And what do? They immediately fall down before him, acknowledging his authority over them. But how often do we as believers who profess to know Christ treat his authority with such indifference, with such disregard? The demons know who he is. But many of us who claim to follow him live as if we have no concept of his power, no understanding of his authority. We live lives of disobedience. We live lives of half-hearted submission. We say with our lips that he is Lord, but live as though he has no real authority over our lives. And I do want to make a note about the fact that even the demons know that their judgment is coming. Because if perhaps the reason we don't step out on faith is a sort of uncomfortableness or maybe insecurity about ourselves or our condition. A lot of Christians are very still bothered by their past. And this should oddly give us comfort, because when the demons remind you of your past, you can remind them of their future, because they're well aware of the judgment that's coming. When the demons around you remind you of your past, remind them of their future. But regardless, this passage ought to break your heart. How can we who have been saved by his grace, who claim to follow him, show less honor and fear of his authority than demons who have no hope of salvation? The demons acknowledge his authority, and immediately they tremble. They recognize that he is their judge, and yet we think we are exempt because we know all the right things. Well, I have a newsflash. Even the demons believe and shudder. It is one thing to know who Jesus is. It's another thing to submit to him, to bow before him, to live as though he is the king and you are his servant. The passage, this encounter should confront every single one of us. We ought to tremble not merely because of who he is, but because of how often we, in our practical lives, deny his authority. You have to understand that submission to Christ is not optional. It is the very essence of what it means to be a Christian. Christ is in the name. If he is not Lord of all, then he is not Lord at all. So I ask you today, will you bow before him? Not in fear as the demons do, but in worship, acknowledging his rightful place as king over all creation. Will you submit to his authority and live as though he is the sovereign Lord over every area of your life? Only when you truly do, in your mind and in your heart, submit to the authority of Christ, will you find the courage to be a light in the darkness, following the footsteps of our Lord. Beloved, we must first come to terms with the authority of Jesus. It's not enough simply to acknowledge him with our words. If he is truly Lord, he must reign in every area of our lives. His authority must shape our decisions, our actions, and our hearts. And once we recognize that he is Lord of all, only then will we be willing to go to places and to people and to situations that challenge us, that make us uncomfortable. Jesus didn't stay in the safety of the unknown, or of the known, and neither should we. If we truly understand his sovereign authority, we will be willing to cross the barriers of comfort to reach the lost, the broken, and the unclean, just as he did. We're not called to remain in our holy huddles, avoiding the world. We are called to take the gospel to the very places where his light is needed most. Let us then rise from our complacency and follow the Lord. Not where it is safe, but where his sovereign authority calls. For in the disruption of our comfort lies the power to see souls set free and lives transformed for his glory. As John Wesley once said, "Give me 100 preachers who fear nothing but sin and love nothing but God, and I care not a straw whether they be clergy or lay people. Such alone will shake the gates of hell and bring the kingdom of heaven on earth."